Signal lost. Establishing connection. The Phantom Archive.
Goodness me. It has been a long time since I uploaded an episode for the Phantom Archive. And yes, Phantom Archive. It has been changed. Previously it was known as Sinister's Tales. So I was thinking that, this new name is much more suitable for this channel. I've been so caught up with work, didn't have time to upload, and I was so busy. And then an opportunity came where I have been relocated, same job, but I relocated to a different site, and I found that I had more time now. I was thinking, what, to get back to telling more stories, upload more videos, and So without further ado, right? Let's begin with the first episode. Okay, let me see. It starts. Okay. I don't believe in the supernatural, or at least I wasn't used to it. That all changed though one day on December 8th, 2010. I was in my early 20s and was hanging out with my friends I made at work. We were at a chalet which had a pool and an arcade nearby. I wasn't married, but most of my friends brought their spouses along during the holidays. Most of us had rooms to ourselves, except for a few of us. However, not all of us were sleeping in. Some decided to only attend during the mornings but retire to their own homes where they could sleep comfortably. Others who stayed in and had no room slept in the living room at level 1. It was mainly the guys. The chalet was only 2 stories tall and had about 5 rooms plus 1 storage room. And like I mentioned, the only people sleeping in the living room were guys, while those in the room were mainly with spouses. We stayed there for 3 days and 2 nights, but wished we only spent our time there for a day. It started innocently enough. Upon arrival, we unpacked our things and made ourselves at home, chatting, laughing, and having a barbecue. The camaraderie was excellent, and soon night fell. The first night was uneventful for me. I slept like a rock, but some things happened as I was in slumber. One of my friends, let's name him Roy, was spending time with the boys when he saw his wife waving at him from the second floor corridor. She promptly proceeded inside the room, closing the door but leaving it slightly ajar. Roy then took his leave from the boys in the living room and went upstairs. When he arrived at the room, he closed the door behind him. He saw his wife was sleeping on the right side of the bed, blanket covering her body, and she was facing the right side of the room, which was the opposite of where Roy was. Roy promptly laid down next to his wife on the left side of the bed and began pulling the blanket cover. He then leaned in close to his wife, bringing his nose close to her cheeks, wanting to kiss her gently. However, as he was close to his wife's face, he began to smell a rotten stench coming from her. The odor was so putrid that he felt like throwing up. He got up and made a foul face before exclaiming, "Cat, what on earth is that smell? Did you just fart? What did you eat?" He began to nudge her gently, trying to get her to sit up and face him to explain herself. However, as he nudged her multiple times, he heard, "Hey, you farted?" Ugh. Roy spun around and saw his wife at the door entrance, clenching her nose and fanning her hands in front of her face. Suddenly the room felt cold for him, and his spine chilled. If that's his wife, who's the woman lying next to him? So he quickly got up and ran to his wife. His wife screamed and scolded Roy. She began to hit him on the arm several times for scaring her. Roy turned around to look at the woman lying on the bed, but there was no one. He slowly walked towards the bed. He looked everywhere and underneath the bed, but there was no sign of any women in the room. Well, except for his wife. His wife looked at Roy as if he had gone mad and asked him what was wrong. He tried to explain himself, but he was incoherent. His wife knew something was wrong and began to calm Roy down. Once calm, he explained everything. Well, it could be a bolster pillow. Maybe. But what about the long hair? Imagination, perhaps? Alright. But what about the stench? I sure as shit didn't fart. Maybe bad ventilation? We should check if there are dead rats in the vents. Okay, one rat couldn't have caused that bad of a stench. Maybe a dozen. Okay, this establishment is in serious trouble if dozens of dead rats are in the vents. You know what? Maybe even 100. Because it was highly toxic. However, Roy's case was a small part of what happened there. Chiesa, our other friend, told us that his wife saw him enter the storeroom and close the door behind him. She initially thought nothing about it, but then grew curious as time passed. She decided to check up on him after 30 minutes since he wasn't seen coming out of the storeroom. However, as she opened the door, she found no one inside the storeroom. Kieran chimed in, claiming he heard children laughing in one of the other rooms on level 2. Oh, really? You heard it? I thought I was the only one. Everyone began exchanging stories in the living room about the strange encounter. I just sat there trying my best to listen to every conversation. Silence. No one dared to speak. Mind you, Knox, this was in the morning. Everyone nudged one another to go and have a look. You know what? It's probably the wind, I said. All eyes were on me. And frankly, I've had it. Perhaps it was work fatigue or the stress that got to them. Still, I assured everyone that they were hallucinating and that it was nothing but their imagination. I volunteered to check on the room that had been shut, but as I began to check on which door had been slammed, I found all the doors were closed. So I didn't know which one to check on. Hey, all the doors are closed, so which one do I check? I don't know. All of them? One guy chimed. I dreaded checking each and every room, but I had to dispel the rumor of paranormal activities happening in the chalet. So I started with a level 1, which has 2 rooms. Checked the first, checked the second, nothing. Then I proceeded my way up, which had 3 rooms. And the third room I checked, nothing. 4, 5 checked, nothing. Comes the 5th room. In all honesty, the checking of room was mainly uneventful, and after clearing the last room, I made my way out of it. I stopped dead in my tracks and looked in the general direction of where the sound might come from. I wanted to open the wardrobe and check what was inside, but something told me not to proceed. At this point, My heart was pounding like a jackhammer. My hands were clammy. My legs were shaking slightly. Cold beads started to form at the top of my brows. Reluctant as I am, I approached the wardrobe cautiously and slowly. I held my left hand up slowly, trying and almost grabbing the closet handle. At this point, I also realized how still the air in the room was and how eerily quiet it was. As my hands were about to grab the handle, "You done here?" What? My whole body instinctively jolted. It felt like electricity ran through my spine and dissipated throughout my entire body from all directions. Feeling relieved that Caden, just opened the door into the room, I told him the weird sounds that were coming from the wardrobe. I asked him to accompany me as I opened the wardrobe. He was reluctant, but since there were two of us, he felt slightly brave about it. At first, he was at the doorway and took about maybe 3 steps before he stopped. And I didn't realize it because my focus was still on the wardrobe, and I expected him to be beside me in a few seconds even if he did stop. But then, after I slowly walked forward, I realized that he was nowhere near me because I can see from my peripheral vision. So I turned to him and I noticed he was standing still. It's as if something is holding him down in one spot. But his eyes and jaw told a different story. His eyes were wide and his jaws dropped slightly. He then slowly raised his right arm and then pointed to the window. His expression was filled with horror, and I didn't know what he saw. But I braced myself, so I slowly swiveled my head to the window. And I saw what he saw. The windows had maroon curtains that partially covered them. And the mind-boggling thing was that the curtains took on the shape of a person, as if someone was hiding behind the curtains. And it wasn't just one. There were 3 figures behind the curtains. I couldn't make out the face or anything that required intricate details. And the curtains were not long, so I could catch a glimpse of their clothes. And oddly enough, it was a white dress that was tattered and covered in dirt. Suddenly, the room began to have a rotten stench, akin to that of like discovering a decomposed body that's been there for some time. Then I hear giggling that's coming from the curtains. I turned to Caden and was about to make a dash for it when the wardrobe kept banging loudly. It was as if something was begging to be let out, or someone. So I screamed and began to dash for the door, and I noticed that Caden was nowhere to be found. I didn't think too much of it at the time, but now that I'm writing it to you, I should have conked him on the head for leaving me behind all alone. But anyway, as I exit out of the door, I saw Caden, just scurrying down the stairs. I too, myself, sprinted down the corridor and down the flight of stairs. The others patiently waited for me and Caden and decided to talk amongst themselves to kill the boredom when they all looked up and found both of us scurrying down the stairs. One of them asked how our little investigation was. I quickly sat down on the couch, trying to catch my breath. I then told them what happened earlier. I thought you'd never believe in ghosts. Can't believe you are telling stories related to the paranormal. I don't, and I never will, Okay, a logical explanation would be that I don't know, I saw things, hallucination, and the wardrobe, probably had a small animal. Come on, I need someone else upstairs to check out what it was. So I brought several friends upstairs to check out the wardrobe. When we arrived in front of it, I carefully opened it and found nothing inside. And perhaps whatever was inside got out, the small animal. So we searched the room for any signs of critters, but there were none. And before I left the room, I closed the door behind me, so whatever small animal was in there, they couldn't escape. Who knows what it was? And outside the room, I told them the events that unfolded. They just shrugged and say, well, there was nothing there, so they can't do much. That kind of suck. We all went back down and tried to calm ourselves down. Several hours later, we went swimming, played arcade, and had another barbecue that night. And when night fell, one of our friends' spouses suggested playing the Spirit of the Coin. I had never heard of such a game, but judging from its name, it sounded kinda childish. I wasn't in on the whole thing because, like I said, I had never believed it before, so naturally I didn't want to join. However, the others were quick to jump in on it. Come on, we all experience weird stuff lately in the chalet. Why not, ask if it means us harm? At the very least, we might have another friend to accompany us. Some laughed at the thought, whilst others disagreed with the whole thing. Their reasoning for disagreeing: you should never mess with spirits residing in the area. It has caused, from the previous encounter, it has caused quite a bit of trouble. And that is not a sign of them being friendly. It probably was a sign for us to leave the area. And again, I don't believe in this whole thing. But, their argument was pretty sound. The others who wanted to play kept trying to persuade the rest to play. Some crumbled. Others held their ground. Me? Well, I let them indulge me in this game. The rules were very simple. We have this board that we made up with letters and a yes, a no, and a goodbye to end it all. All participants were to place their hands on the coin, and then one of us would chant, and try to call the spirits that reside in the area to grace us with their presence. From there, we ask a series of questions. Again, to me, sounds pretty dumb. Any one of us could control the coin, if you think about it. But, whatever. We sat down and began to play the game. One of us chanted to the spirits to grace us with their presence. Are there any spirits nearby us? And they keep on repeating again and again. And then, suddenly, the coin moved towards an answer. Yes. Some were in awe, while many were laughing. And one of them exclaimed, "Okay, I know one of you is moving the coin." Everyone shook their heads, grinning and laughing. They were making light of the entire thing. Then, one of us asked a question that was supposed to be for us and not the so-called spirits. Okay, so who moved the coin? The coin suddenly moved to M-E. Another round of laughter erupted as others asked who was moving the coin. The coin moved again. M E. As if. Okay, really now. Who's moving the coin? Okay, enough with the jokes. We get it. Okay. Coin moved again. M E. A cool and unpleasant breeze blew in our direction. The lights in other areas began to flicker for a few seconds, and then it was back to normal. We all looked at each other. All of us had this, oh, it is getting real face. Now we are about 70, maybe 90% sure that no one moved the coin, at least no one human. Caden then asked a question. How many of you are in this chalet with us? There was a slight pause. Everyone was silent, and the air felt heavy for some reason. When the coin moved, I could tell everyone's facial expression was serious. Some were visibly shaken. The coin stopped at the number 5. Okay. So there's 5 of you. Now, do you mean us harm? The coin began to move again. Now, the longer it moved, the more we knew its intended answer. It slowly moved across the board, and as we watched, our eyes were filled with horror because it was approaching to the answer, and that answer was yes. Tracy, one of my friend's spouse, removed her finger from the coin before we could end the entire thing properly. Miley, also my other friend's spouses, screamed at Tracy. She screamed and said, "Why did you remove your finger?" Tracy, on the other hand, repeatedly said that she doesn't want to continue. And Miley said, "If you don't want to continue, we must end the session properly." "End what session?" Tracy shouted. "Just don't want to continue? I don't care how we end it, we just end it. We stop right here." And Miley was insistent that there is a proper way to end it. There are rules to it. Rules are there for a reason. Tracy was adamant because she does not want to play and she does not care. Miley then said in a very low and almost threatening tone, "Since you removed your finger, now all 5 of them will haunt you." Tracy does not care and she does not want to play. At this point, I knew Tracy could not be reasoned with. She was visibly shaken by the whole ordeal, and no amount of logical explanation would calm her down or get her to see sense. As the two continued to argue, many holding on to the coin began letting go because they wanted to separate Tracy and Miley from each other. Miley, who witnessed this, began to flip out on everyone. So here we are, having to stop the session because of the argument. Since everyone removed their hands from the coin, we are now what Miley would call cursed by the spirit. As we all cleaned up after ourselves, nothing unusual happened. One thing is clear though, no one wanted to sleep in their designated rooms. All of us chose to sleep in the living room. I fell asleep first, as I was dead tired. I heard distant noises and chatter. However, half asleep. I couldn't tell if the noises I heard were from the reality or they were in my dream. Then, as the noises and chatter became more apparent, I opened a fraction of my eyes. I rubbed my eyes and used my elbow to support myself up to see what the commotion was about. But there was no one in the living room. The commotion was coming from outside the chalet. I wanted to ignore and continue my sleep, but something told me I shouldn't. Feeling reluctant and tired, I began to trudge my way to the others near the pool. Hey, what's going on? Tracy and Miley are missing. Huh? And then I sighed. Have they gone somewhere to settle their differences? Physically? I did not like this one bit. The only reason I didn't like it was, well, it kinda cut into my slumber time. So, we decided to divide ourselves into groups. Some of us scoured around the perimeter of the chalet and the rest at the parking lot. And as we split up, as we searched these two places, we further divided ourselves into smaller sub-teams to cover a wider area, hoping to cut the search time by half. We probably searched for about an hour, maybe slightly more than that, before we gather back in the living room to report our findings, or in this case, lack thereof. While the others were discussing where they might have gone, I asked a silly question. Hey, have you guys... has anyone searched the room? They all turned to look at me and then each other. What? You haven't searched the rooms yet? I asked in bewilderment. Others said there was no reason for them to go to the room because, well, there was no noise of Miley and Tracy fighting. If there were noises, then they would be there. But then I retorted back and said that that's the only place left to check. At this point, I'm kind of frustrated that they didn't check. I mean, why on earth wouldn't you check the rooms first? If they were in one of the rooms, then, you know, that means we went out searching for nothing. Suddenly, one of the guys from the second floor shouted at us and said, "Hey, I found, someone in this room." Someone? Well, it's better than nothing. So all of us rushed upstairs, and then all of us were in the room. When we arrived, we noticed that there was someone behind the curtains. Just one. And I started to feel a sudden chill running down my spine. The way that person stood behind the curtain was the same exact way when I saw someone standing behind the curtains earlier this morning. The others then began to check the other rooms because there was only one so far in the room that we were in. But somehow, I got a feeling that both of them were in this room. Check the wardrobe, I muttered. The others didn't hear me as they were calling out the person from behind the curtain to step out. I had to repeat myself again, louder this time. Those who heard me looked at me puzzled, but did not question me further and did what I told them to. And then as they got closer to the wardrobe, it began to shake violently. And there was a loud knocking noise coming from within. All of us stopped dead, frozen with fear. Fear of who or what could be inside. I wanted to step forward and just open the wardrobe myself, but I myself was frozen in fear. It took us a few minutes to recover from the shock and fear before someone quickly flung the wardrobe door open. It was Tracy. curled up in a ball, her body swaying back and forth, as if a child traumatized by an event. We called her out several times, asking her to come out and ask if she was okay, but she didn't pay any attention to us. She just kept swaying back and forth like someone possessed. Her breathing got heavier and she began to make this growling noise. It was something out of a horror film. While we tended to Tracy, some went out to get what we can assume was Miley behind the curtains, and the rest called the others were searching at the other rooms back to the main room. So you can imagine that now the rooms were basically packed just like sardines, having little room to wiggle around. As the others removed the curtains, they found Miley standing there emotionless, staring at us. People began tapping onto both girls' shoulders, calling their names and asking if they were alright. Then Miley, with an emotionless expression, expressed disgust and anger. "Hey! Get your hands off me! I'm not Miley. Miley is sleeping." And Tracy stopped swaying her body and slowly turned her head towards us. It was almost mechanical, unnatural, the way she turned her head. And then she giggled. Her giggle was not her usual one that we always hear. It was similar to an old woman for some reason. And then she began to speak, confirmed my suspicion. Both of them laughed maniacally. We were all creeped out by this. Their respective spouses, though afraid, had to remain calm and kept calling them out in hopes of, somehow getting their voice across to their wives, wherever they were. Suddenly Caden was sent flying as Tracy pushed him away. He landed on the bed, which cushioned the impact on his back. We were all surprised at the incident. I mean, she probably weighed about 50, 55 kilos. And so how could a woman so skinny push a 75 kilo man that easily? Much less sending him flying. It was here that I began to believe that what I'm witnessing is basically paranormal activity. The lights started to flicker and the doors from various rooms began to flung open before slamming shut, and then flung open again and slamming shut. Doorknobs started to rattle as if someone or something was trying to enter or leave. Both women, who I believe were possessed at this point, began laughing hysterically as the events unfolded. Seeing how useless it was, we all ran out of the room and left the chalet for the parking lot. Many of us wanted to leave the chalet there and then, but seeing that they didn't bring their bags, their clothes, they groaned at the idea of returning and getting them back. Who knows what will happen if they go back now? Someone then decided to call an expert in exorcism to cleanse the woman from her possessions. So they did. They finally got someone to come down. A few hours later, the person came and asked to lead the way. He urged the females to stay in the parking lot for fear that the spirit might claim their next vessel once he had cleansed the affected women. Some of the guys, mainly their husbands, volunteered to stay behind to accompany their wives. With that, the rest of us went back to the chalet. Upon reaching the outskirts of the chalet, we can hear someone sobbing and then footsteps of someone running up the stairs. Then we saw Tracy running back to the room we found her earlier. The priest or expert, I don't know, began to investigate the sound of Miley sobbing first. He went into the kitchen and then the sobbing stops. And we all saw Miley crouching on top of the kitchen counter, eating, get this, eating raw meat. All of us were horrified that she was eating raw meat. Kieran began to rush forward, trying to stop Miley from eating raw meat, but the expert held him off and told him that it was dangerous for him to approach her now. He protested, but then the expert says if Kieran does not follow what the expert instructs, then he will leave. Kieran glared at the expert, but deep down he knew he was right. So Kieran backed down for now. The expert began to chant some sort of mantra or prayers, I don't know. He then began to take water and salt from his belt and sprinkled it on the floor with every step he took to move forward. Miley then stopped and glared at the expert. She spat out the raw meat from her mouth and threw it at the expert. She demanded him to stop. Whilst this was ongoing, Tracy could be heard upstairs laughing hysterically and banging on the wardrobe door. She shouted for the expert to stop whatever he was doing and that it was all in vain. I can't help but, be amazed at this entire thing. I was a non-believer in the paranormal activities, but right now, I'm sold. The expert instructed us to get a glass of water quickly, and we did so. He then muttered some sort of mantra or prayers, again I'm not too sure, and before splashing the water onto Miley, she then fainted and he grabbed her to support her. We all rushed forward to carry her to the living room, and the expert went up and did the same thing to Tracy. Tracy was slightly difficult because she was shouting and she was flailing her arms about as, she was sprinkled with water. But eventually, she fainted and we carried her down soon after. The expert then instructed us to quickly get our belongings and go to a parking lot immediately. All of us got our belongings and went to the parking lot. Their husbands carried their wives while we helped bring their belongings along. Once at the parking lot, we stuffed our belongings into our respective vehicles and, many of us have left, but some of us stayed because, we still need to check out in the morning. So not all of us wanted to leave. Some stayed, whilst many left. I was one of them who stayed behind, but I didn't really sleep, in the chalet and slept in my car. Who wants to go back there again and face 5 spirits? No thank you, I'm in my car. Before we all dispersed, we all told the expert about what happened before the incident. He was horrified and absolutely disappointed that we made light of such things. He had this grave look and then began telling us that if the rules of the spirit of the coin were true, then none of us would be safe even at home. He instructed us to do some things before entering our houses. One is to pray in front of our door before entering or leaving the house. The next is to sprinkle salt around our house to prevent them from entering. He also mentioned that we should not open the windows or doors if we hear anybody knocking on the windows, or doors. Even if you hear someone familiar calling out to us, we should not do anything. Opening Either the windows or the doors would mean we allow them to enter our homes, and then it would be even more trouble. Not wanting to have trouble following us, we did as we were instructed. Some of us informed the others who left earlier via text. They too did as were taught. Over the next few months, all of us faced similar experiences. We often hear knocking, sobbing, hearing shuffling of feet outside our doors, someone calling out our names at the windows, and it lasted for 1-2 months maybe before finally the situation died down. I urge everyone not to try what we did and not make light of such things. You never know what kind of trouble might await for those who transgress the rules of the spirit of the coin. Alright, our first story, and we are starting off strong. Anyway, the story about our friend here is indeed very fascinating. He shared many details, and I can foresee some people calling him rude or uncaring, like the part where he has to be part of a search team. I can understand how he feels, by the way. Having to wake up and to find your efforts worth or not because they were they weren't gone far off. In fact, they were in the room and no one searched for them there. Plus, we also cannot forget about the fact that he didn't believe in the paranormal activities initially, but after the entire thing, we can safely assume he is now a believer. Now, if anyone told him a ghost story, I'd wager he would listen attentively. He would still probably think logically at first, but at the very least, he won't discount that, paranormal stuff may have a say in this. Okay. Nonetheless, that was a very long and heavy story, so I think I will read short stories for now. And this one says, "Hi Nox, I wanted to send you a story about my experience. It's nothing remarkable. It's short, might not be scary. So during the lockdown, I was one of the essential workers who needed to screen people for their temperatures. I had to work the night shift in this particular security sensitive area. There were only about 4 of us at the time. We're stationed at the swab area for staffs. The staff are required to get swabbed first before the start of the shift, and we are the ones to do it. It's pretty uncomfortable. We had this long swab stick that we insert at their nose and goes very deep down. Many would cough or sneeze after the end of it. So to cut the story short, I was urged to use the restroom when we were all waiting for the staff to come to the swab station. The one nearest to the swab station was out of order, so I had to use the one furthest away. I had to walk inside the bus hall and then onto the concourse area. Again, no one was in that area due to the lockdown, so I was pretty much all alone. I entered one of the cubicles and did my business. As I exited the cubicle, I went to the sink area to wash my hands when I noticed one of my colleagues just standing there, doing nothing but staring at the mirror. I washed my hands and I said hi to her. And I complained about the hassle of using the restroom since the nearest one was out of order. She didn't move a muscle throughout the conversation or respond to my mini rant. Initially, I thought, it's kind of weird, but it didn't bother me too much. Afterwards, I told her I wait outside the restroom so we could proceed back together. I stood outside the restroom, leaning against the wall using my phone. I was entertained by the myriad of memes on the internet, and I lost track of how much time had passed. Maybe about 10-20 minutes passed before I realized my colleague had yet to leave the restroom. I'd notice even if they passed because they had to walk in front of me. I decided to check on my colleague to see if she was okay. As I approached the restroom, I noticed that it was dark. The restroom light would turn on via motion sensor. Strange. It can't be that she did her business in the dark. Any normal human being would flail their arms or perhaps, make wild movements to trigger the motion sensor. As I neared the door, a hand grabbed over my shoulder and I jolted and screamed at the top of my lungs. I turned around and saw the very same colleague who was supposedly in the restroom. Wait, didn't you... when did you leave the restroom? Huh? Leave? I have never left. And I was at the swap station all this time. Also, what took you so long? What? No, I saw you inside the restroom earlier, and I told you that I'll wait outside for you, and we can proceed back together. How? Okay, but I didn't use the restroom though. So we had this back and forth conversation about what I saw and where she was. Still, ultimately, we decided to walk back since we needed to start preparing the swap station. I thought that she might be pulling a prank, but when I asked the rest of the guys, they all confirmed that I was the only one who had left for the restroom and that she had just gone recently to come and fetch me. Now that I think about it, I hear no footsteps or running water near the sink. She also acted weirdly when I spoke to her, as if she were lifeless. Until today, this memory plays in my mind. And I guess I was lucky that my colleague went out to search for me, because who knows who or what I would meet if I entered the restroom again. Alright, let's continue to another short story. It goes, "Hi Nox, my story is brief, but to me it was kinda terrifying. I work as a security guard. We often get deployed to various places depending on the availability of men that day. I was new, but I was deployed at the entrance to a particular forest. This forest had various entry points, and the one I'm stationed in has been cordoned off completely from public due to the hazardous terrain. I was there to prevent any unwanted visitors from sneaking in. So before the placement of security guards, there were numerous times where visitors would sneak in and then get injured somewhere deep in that area. Paramedics would then be needed to be called, and they have to find this injured person and bring them back to the ambulance, which was a Herculean task due to the hazardous terrain. They had to carry the stretcher and navigate safely. So the government then decided to act and set up security booths for us officers to turn away unwanted visitors. Anyway, that night, I was guarding the place with two others when an old lady approached the security booth. When I saw this, I stood up and exited the booth to turn her away. However, as soon as I stepped out of my booth, she vanished. She was hobbling earlier, so she could not have moved fast, or in this case, run. I began to turn on my flashlight and search the area. The forest does have a footpath, but it gets harder to follow due to the hazardous terrain. At one point, the footpath requires the person to jump down from a ledge to get to the other side, and in certain instances, you are required to climb to various places to continue on. Since she was hobbling, I figured that I should be able to see her not far into the trail. However, as soon as I was about to begin walking the trail, a frail voice from behind said, "Are you looking for me, Shan?" A bone-chilling laughter ensued. I turned around and quickly bolted back for the security booth. I didn't care if there was an actual old lady behind me, but in my mind, screw this. I'm gonna push her down and I'll make my way back. And as I turned around to make a dash for it, there was no one at all behind me, which was also the reason why I sprinted back. I forcefully entered the booth and slammed the door shut. The other two guys that were in the booth looked up at me as if I saw a ghost. In this case, I heard a ghost. I began to open up about what happened, and they didn't look surprised. They then shared that they had similar experiences and pointed out that what I had experienced was pretty mild. Mild? I was astonished that they would consider that. But then I sat down and listened to the story. They are right. My experience was mild. They told me that the ghost over here would often lure officers out from the booth one by one and into the forest, often disguising as a regular human that defied the officer's warning, forcing them to an off-beaten trail that few people know about. Officers then would get lost afterwards and needed help getting back to the booth. However, with very poor reception, they couldn't contact their friends at the booth or anyone for that matter, and this resulted in a search and rescue the following day. The lost officers would recount harrowing tales of ghostly figures following them and hearing voices calling out to them and the bone-chilling laughter that I heard. Alright, so don't go chasing out this so-called civilian. Okay, noted. Oh, wait, hang on. Why didn't any of you warn me about this before? Both of them looked at each other. You didn't tell him? No, I thought you did. Well, to be fair, I thought you did. Nox, I'm just glad to be alive. Sometimes these things, can happen. Party A thought Party B did it, whilst Party B thought Party A had done it. And ultimately, no one does anything because they assume either would have done it. And it was lucky that our dear friend over here did not get caught up in something very complicated. If not, he would have experienced, what other unfortunate officers have experienced. Okay, yeah. I think that's enough short stories. We'll do one last one before we end off for tonight. And this one reads, Hi Nox, my name is Johan, and my story goes like this. I was returning to my hometown in Malaysia. It's a small village located far from the city. It has been some time since I visited my parents and got a job in Kuala Lumpur. I took a few days leaves from work to visit my parents. The day when I was supposed to go back, I worked for only half a day before clocking out. I had packed all my stuff in advance, and they were all in the trunk of my car. I decided to have a quick lunch and bought more food to serve as dinner later during the long drive. Thus, I drove for hours, made several pit stops at a gas station for a toilet break, performed my prayers, and filled up the gas for my car. Soon, night fell, and the food I bought earlier during the midday was being eaten for dinner. I couldn't afford to eat the food that required cutlery, so I ate a chicken sandwich. My GPS showed me that I would reach my destination in 15 minutes. By then, it'll be 11 p.m. I just had to get through the narrow stretch of road leading to the village where my parents lived. Both sides of the roads are filled with shrubs and thick trees. The lack of lampposts to illuminate the roads adds to the eeriness of the situation. When you're alone and in the dark, your mind starts to wander and think of the most ridiculous scenario you never asked for. My eyes began to dart around the side of the road. I didn't know why I did so. I somehow felt compelled, as if something or someone was calling for me. Either that, or perhaps I was expecting something to lunge out of the thick greenery and onto my car. Each time my eyes darted around, I stopped and focused on the road. I kept telling myself not to look around, just focus on what's in front of you. Then, far into the distance, I saw a pearly white figure at the side of the road. I couldn't determine what it was at first, but as I got closer, the figure became larger and larger and larger, until I could make out that it was a person going in the same direction as I was. I felt sympathetic at the fact that a person was walking towards the village I was heading to. I thought that she or he was a villager. It's 15 minutes by car, but on foot, maybe it'll take around 45 to an hour, maybe, depending on your pace. I slowed down and came to a stop beside them. I lowered my window and took a good look at the person. It was a woman. Due to the lack of the light, I couldn't make out the details of her facial features. "Hey, you need a ride? And I'm heading to the village too. It's faster in a car." She stopped walking and stood there, unmoving. So do you need a ride? If you're afraid of a stranger and prefer to walk, it's fine by me. No harm, no foul." She didn't respond immediately, but turned her head slowly towards me and flashed an unnerving grin. "I'm not afraid of you. It's you who should be afraid of me. Are you sure you want to give me a lift?" She started to let out a soft giggle, which then became a full-on howling. I was galvanized to hit the gas and sped ahead, leaving her in the dust. What kind of laugh was that? The vibe was scary too. Seeing her figure slowly becoming smaller and smaller in the rear-view mirror calmed me down for a while. All I could think was getting to my parents' place soon. Thinking that the episode was behind me, I began to relax a little. It can't be. In the distance, the pearly white figure was small, but got larger as I got closer. Is that the same woman? As I drove past her, I could hear the eerie laughter howling away again. It can't be, right? I'm not in a loop? Am I? But I kept seeing her again and again and again. My fear kept rising and I kept accelerating, hoping to escape this nightmarish loop. My breathing became unstable and my heart was pounding on my chest as if about to burst out of my chest any minute. Realizing I wouldn't be getting out of this loop, I decided to take a deep breath and do my best to calm down. I was still scared, but at least I wasn't panicking like before. For the next set of loops, I decided to drive and stop about 50 meters away from her. I frantically searched for prayer recitation from the Quran and played it on speaker. During the time I sped off, I didn't realize that my window was still rolled down. I rolled the window up but left it slightly ajar so that the speaker's sound could escape. I was hoping that once that woman heard it, she would flee from the scene and hopefully, just hopefully, I'd be free from this nightmarish loop. She was still standing in front of me, but as soon as I started playing recitations from the Quran, her head began to tweak and she was crying. Immediately she flew up in the sky and vanished like those UFO videos you'll see online. She just whoop and, well, vanished. I had no time to sit there stunned. I began to accelerate and drove off, not wanting her to get back. As I drove, I didn't see any hint of a possibility that she might be lingering around. Okay, good. Good. I was praying desperately to God, seeking protection and refuge from such evil entities, hoping to return to my parents' home in one piece. I also prayed that it never followed me home, lest it decided to haunt my parents next. After 15 minutes, I arrived at the village where my parents reside. I let out a sigh of relief as I began to park. My mum, who must have heard a vehicle approaching, opened the wooden door and gave me a bright smile. I would have run out of the car to hug her after that whole entire ordeal, but I knew better than to do that. I recited verses from the Quran inside my car before exiting. As I took every step, I ensured that it never followed me home before I ascended a small flight of wooden stairs to my home. Assalamualaikum, Mak. Waalaikumsalam. Wah, all my years I've never seen you recite any form of prayers when you enter my house. You always enter without a care in the world. What happened? Have you seen a ghost? I denied that notion, but damn. She right though. How does she know? That is what you might want to call a mother's instinct. And you cannot mess around with that. Kinda scary how an act of kindness can lead to such an event. But we should all take precautions when we are trying to lend a hand to strangers. I think many people would have known that, there have been cases where a number of people, especially in groups, that prey on kind souls along the street. They appear weak, helpless, or lost. And when a kind soul appears, they try to lure them away from people and then, bam, ambush them with weapons, threatening to harm them or their families or whatever. For example, it could be a kid who's lost and crying, and then you're around and decided to approach and help. Then they lead you away to their last known parents' location, and without you realizing, there are not many people around. Then from the shadows, many strangers, decided to rob you. There are many similar cases, but different variations, as well as different tactics and scenarios. But you get the gist of it. I'm not saying don't help people, but, try to spot red flags as soon as possible. If you can, think of a more efficient and safe method to solve the issue before following someone, be it physically or with their instruction. Maybe you can bring the lost kid to the nearest police station, or maybe call the police to come to your location instead, something like that. At the end of the day, your safety takes priority. Remember that. And with that, we have concluded tonight's episode. I thank you all for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. And fair winds, people. Fair winds.